Hi, my name is Mia Armstrong Lopez. I'm a managing editor at ASU Media Enterprise and one of the editors behind the Future Tense fiction series, which you can now read in Issues in Science and Technology. And I'm really excited to be joined today by Monica Byrne, a novelist, playwright, screenwriter, and author of the books The Girl in the Road and The Actual Star, as well as Parasocial, which is September's Future Tense fiction story. Monica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
So to start, I want to ask you, and this is going to be a tricky question because it is a complex story, but if you had to describe Parasocial in one sentence or maximum two sentences, what would those sentences be?
It would be down and out actors license their image for the unlimited use of people who want to pay for it.
Okay, excellent. That was a tricky task and you did it very well. And it gives us a lot to dig into. But I actually want to start with a bit of an origin story. So the
Yes.
idea for Parasocial, if I'm not mistaken, sort of occurred to you while walking down the street in St. Paul in summer 2021. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong there, but I want you to take me to that moment, to that spark of an idea.
Yeah, well, ideas come a lot of time. They're like little shoots that come up out of compost that has been settling for a long time.
Yeah.
And for me, the compost that had been settling for a long time, it's not a happy story, but my father passed away in 2018, and we were really, really close. And it was very difficult to lose him. And after that, I noticed that I just stopped dating completely.
Mm,
Like I didn't want to put myself out there. It felt too risky. It felt too scary to love, to
yeah.
try to love. And that was a way of, processing grief. And at the same time, I just became fixated. I am not going to say who on
Fair.
a certain celebrity. Um, and thought about him all the time. And I was very clear about what I was doing. It wasn't a real relationship. But the relationship I had in my head, the scenarios in my head, they weren't sexual. They were fantasies of safety and fantasies of like being with someone who understood me and would listen to me. And that took up the place of dating for me for a very long time. And, eventually it sort of fell away because I didn't need it anymore. But that relationship, if you want to call it a relationship, was very important to me during a
Yeah.
very difficult period of my life. So 3 years later, I was taking a road trip across the US to celebrate my 40th birthday and was walking down the street in St. Paul, which actually is my father's birthplace. And
Wow.
it's just like, what if that could really happen? And then I was surprised that it didn't already exist. It was one of those things that
Yeah.
like, why hasn't a company already like approached actors to license their image for women to interact with, like their full hologram? I mean, I don't think we're there for technology, but like
Not that
we're
far. Doesn't
we're
seem
not
that
that
far.
far in
Yeah.
terms of VFR. Maybe not tangible
Sure.
holograms, but like interactive, especially with, deep machine learning and AI, all of which I have strong opinions about in terms of copyright and art. But it's one of the applications that seemed very obvious to me. And other science fiction, so Black Mirror did an episode based on a similar concept where you could basically recreate a loved one who had died and interact with them. And that episode is very intense. But yeah, that it just popped in my head. It was
Yeah.
called Headcanon at first. Um, the company and the story was called Headcanon, and I was thinking of it as a feature film. And so I sent it to my Hollywood reps first and was like, what do you think about this story? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, thank you for walking us through that. And it's fascinating because it's like what you're describing is sort of a personal origin story of the idea, sort of colliding with this moment, which is sort of like a cultural, technological, political origin story, or these dynamics that are circling around AI and copyright and what it means for us to license our images and who has right to our images and our work. And so I think the themes in the story do seem really poignant in the context of like current debates about AI and creativity, about our own images and what belongs to us, and what gets swept up into these giant learning models, and kind of mixed and molded, and there's new versions of ourselves and our realities and our work out there. In 2023, we saw the SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild strikes. I know those are worlds that you're very embedded in. There are ongoing conversations sort of across creative industries about AI and licensing. So I wanted to ask if there is a message or a lesson or a provocation or a question that you hope that your story brings to sort of those conversations and debates.
Well, I think the lesson of the story is that no matter how much technology advances, we're always going to be human, for better and worse.
Yeah.
And it's masculinity, toxic masculinity will always find a way to manifest in such technologies. I don't want to give anything away in the story, but I wanted to show it from the perspective of the man who does it, also because I wanted to show how artists can be exploited because like the company in the story, Parasocial, doesn't approach like the Brad Pitts of,
Yeah.
it approaches people who haven't had success in a long time and who
Yeah.
are looking for a kind of renaissance. Um, and so there is an element of exploitation to it. And as long as artists, period, um, are without living wages, are without any form of job security, will always be vulnerable, always, also to exploitation, especially through technology. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just sort of to continue on that, it's really interesting because you're a writer imagining these sorts of future scenarios, but you're also a creative worker very much kind of like affected by these debates in the real world. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, from those sort of both sides that are inherently connected, like what sort of policy directions do you think we need to move toward as we're maybe inching closer towards scenarios like the one that Parasocial presents?
Yeah. I mean, I throw it out there because it's so fundamental, and also whenever I throw it out there, I question it because I'm like, no, it's too simple. But universal basic income is just like the most obvious thing to fix so many things, which is just to decouple being able to eat with the work one feels called to. Like it's just the most obvious thing to do next. But I don't think the reason I don't think that will happen or is likely is because capitalism depends on desperate, unhappy people. It depends on people who are constantly scared of not being able to eat. And so they take jobs that are very exploitative. I mean, it's a different situation with Jim Stone in the story because he comes from a place of much more privilege than the vast majority of people. But the overall pattern is relatively the same. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious to sort of build off of that, how you have seen these sorts of technological dynamics that the story explores, which is, the effect of AI and sort of generative AI technology on creativity and reality, affect creative work already.
Well, already, I mean, our work is being used. My work has been used to train these these language learning models. Um, and that's a horrible feeling. I mean, we're being stolen from en masse. And, these tech corporations depend on stealing from artists and vulnerable populations en masse. I do wonder, in terms of how policy will evolve, if there will come a time when, for example, you can sell the rights to your story to, for a language model to be trained on. So
Hmm.
like it's an extra clause. And if they make it sweet enough, like, would we say yes?
Yeah,
Because, um, and I'd like to think I would say no. I'm pretty sure I would say no. But like if it were $1 million, but
right.
that, like, just in terms of a scenario, because that's the kind of money that Jim is offered in Parasocial. And he's not in a position to turn it down, not only because to like cover his basic bills, but also to recover the stardom that he was so used to. So yeah.
Yeah, because it's sort of like the compensation that the story's protagonist receives is not only financial. Financial is a big part of it, but it's also this sort of craving that most artists and public people have, which is to be loved, right? And sort of this affirmation, this public affirmation that he had been missing for a long time. So it's sort of that combination of the dual compensations that makes the deal at the beginning so sweet for him. And then
Right.
we, see how things change over time. But
Yeah, for sure. Although he does initially balk at it because he compares it to prostitution. Like
right,
his very first impression is like, well, this is prostitution. And then, the head of the company is like, what's wrong with prostitution? What's wrong with sex work?
right.
And so, it's a very blurry line that I think a lot of people like to look away from. Some things do count as sex work and some things don't count as sex work. And yeah, I think that's a very feminized category. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it is a good point. I mean, sort of just how his perception of the work changes over time and of what the work means changes
Yes.
over time. Yeah.
And then he extracts another form of compensation from it over
Yeah.
time, which not just being loved, but something non-consensual. I won't. I don't want to spoil the story again, but yeah,
Right.
he
But
extracts another form of compensation from it. Yeah.
yeah. So maybe this is too simplistic of a framing, but I'm curious when we think about the future that you present in Parasocial or a version of the future that you present in Parasocial. Do you think of the story as like a warning, a compass, a more neutral exploration of possibilities, or is there sort of another way that you conceptualize or a box that you might put it in?
Well, okay. This might be too simple an answer, which is I conceive of it as a story, which is meaning it is something in which the reader is an active collaborator and participant
Mm,
in. So they will take away what they want from it. Some people will take away lessons about toxic masculinity.
mhm.
Um, Other people will take away, I think, lessons about the narcissism and stardom and celebrity. Um, I hope people take away different things depending on who they are. And that I think that's what any storyteller hopes, is that it's like here's a buffet. Take what you want and how much you want of each plate, and I just cooked it. you know, loading your plate and digesting is up to you.
Well, the buffet that Monica has cooked for us is available on Issues in Science and Technology at www.issues.org. Everyone, please go read Parasocial. And Monica, thank you so much for writing the story and for taking the time to talk with me about it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mia. It was a delight.